What's up guys, Chris Trini here for Chris Car Productions. Welcome to this tutorial. Today we learn Adobe Premiere Pro in exactly 20 minutes. So as you can see, there's a sequence playing a video in the background, and this is pretty much what we're going to be creating today. So we're creating titles, we're creating a sequence where there's videos with transitions, cuts, there's audio coming up, fading in and out at certain points. We're going to be looking at adjustment layers, we're going to be looking at effects. So let's get started and let's explore everything you need to know to edit your awesome videos inside of Premiere. Alright, so once Premiere loads up, this window will appear and you're just going to want to select a new project. So from here you want to select a location where you want to save the project in, and I'm just going to pick a folder where I can save this in. Then you can just name the project whatever you want. I'm just going to name this Premiere Pro Tutorial, and then once I'm done, click OK. So this is going to open up Premiere and all of its 4 main panels. Now, something I want to mention real quick, some of the panels could be in different places depending on what kind of workspace you have. So if you go under Window, Workspace, if you want to go ahead and select Editing, that is the one that I'm using. It doesn't change what the panels contain and what they're called, but it does change where they are positioned in your work area. So this is just to accommodate different needs depending on what you're doing in Premiere. So the first panel that we're going to be taking a look at is the project panel. And as you can see, Premiere is already telling us that we need to import media in our project panel to start. So we're going to do exactly that, and there's 2 ways of doing this. You can either double click on your project panel. This is going to open up this window that allows you to browse to the folder that you want to import or the files that you want to import. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel because what I prefer to do is just go on Finder directly, just browse to the folder and go to my footage. And then once I find the folder, just drag and drop that folder into the project panel. Doesn't change anything, it's the same thing, but most of the time I already have that folder open on my computer, so it's just faster to do it this way. So this is going to create a folder inside the project panel, and this is called a bin, and this bin contains all of our footage. You can see that it's nicely displayed with thumbnails, and a really neat feature in Premiere is that when you go over these clips, over these thumbnails, you can actually scroll through them and preview what is inside these clips. So once you found the clip that you want, you can just double click on it and this will open it up in your source monitor. Now when it comes to this panel, you can either minimize it or you can even dock it somewhere else. You can see that as I drag it around my work area, some parts of it become blue, but for now I'm just going to minimize it. Alright, so now that we have selected our clip, I want to create a sequence from this clip. But before I do that, I want to go under metadata and I want to check the frame rate of this clip just to make sure that it's the frame rate that we want for our entire sequence. Because whenever we're creating a sequence from a clip, it's actually going to create the sequence based on the settings of that clip. So 23.976 works for me. But before I drag this entire clip into my timeline, I actually want to just select only a portion of this clip instead of just dumping the whole thing in. So maybe I want to get rid of the beginning here and I just want to start it from this point on. So I'm going to hit I on my keyboard, and this is going to set an in point for the video. And then I'm going to scroll through here, and maybe I don't want the camera to just pan away. I want it to stay on the car. So then at this point in time, I'm going to hit O on my keyboard, and this is going to set an out point. So now you can see that we only have a portion highlighted of the entire clip. Now once we have done that, we're able to drag that portion into our timeline. Now there's a few buttons on the bottom here to do that, but what I usually do is I just grab the image and I drag and drop it onto my timeline area. So this is going to create a new sequence, as you can see here, as well as in the project panel. And it has the same exact settings as our clip. In order to check that, we can go to Sequence, Sequence Settings, and you can see that everything is exactly the same as our clip. And then you can simply preview what you have in your timeline by hitting spacebar. This will play through what we just imported. And you can see that the beginning and end of the clip isn't there. It's just a section that we wanted. Now I'm noticing that there's a few extra clips that we don't really need, so what we can do to just get rid of them is to select the first one, then hold shift and select the last one, and then you can just delete that selection by hitting delete. So this won't delete the physical files on your computer, it's just going to get rid of them from your bin and it will just clear up some space. Alright, so let's go ahead and look for another clip that we like, and once we find it, we'll just do the same thing. So we'll double click on it to bring it in our source monitor, set some in and out points, and then just drag it into our timeline. But let's say that this time I don't want to drag both the audio and video of that clip. I only want to drag the video portion of your clip. where if you notice below the preview area of the source monitor, there's a film strip icon right next to a waveform icon. If you just click the film strip icon and drag it into your timeline, it will only bring in the video portion of your clip. Instead, if you click and drag the waveform icon, it will only drag in your audio portion of the clip. Next up, we're going to look at how to trim clips, and there's a few simple ways of doing this. One of the fastest ways is to go to either end of the clip and dragging it in, and this will shorten the clip. Now I'm going to hit Command Z real quick just to undo what we just did, so I can show you another way of trimming a clip. Now we're going to bring up the razor tool, and you can do this by hitting C on your keyboard, which is the shortcut for it, or you can go on the side toolbar here and you can select the razor tool. Now with this selected, you can actually click on the clips and make cuts in them. So now you can see that if I go back to my selector tool by hitting V on my keyboard, I can do the same thing that I did earlier. I can trim them, I can move them around. So the razor tool is just a quick way to make cuts in the clips without deleting anything. So these are pretty much the two main tools that you always use in your timeline. The selector tool, which is your regular computer arrow or cursor, which is used to select things and move them around, or your razor tool, which you can bring up with C, and that will make cuts in your clips. Now another thing I would like to show you is how to apply transitions. Now again, like most other things, there's multiple ways of doing this, but first let's take a look at the fastest way. With a clip selected, you can hit Command D on your keyboard or Control D on a PC, and this will add what's called a default transition. And usually with Premiere, default transitions are simple fades. Now the other way of adding transitions, which is a little bit longer, is by going under your Effects panel. Now this is down here for me on this workspace. For you, if you have another workspace selected, like I said in the beginning, you might find this somewhere else. So once we go there, we can go under the search bar and we can just type in cross, and this will bring up cross dissolve under the video transitions category. Now you can just scrap that all together and you can directly go under that folder of video transitions and find all the transitions that you need, or even other transitions such as this cross zoom. So you can just play around with all of these and see what each of them do. And if you don't like a transition, you can always select that transition and hit delete, and that will make it disappear. So I'm just going to add a cross dissolve to the end here, and you can see that as I hover over my clips, you can see that I can not only just add them at the end of a clip, but I can also add them between clips. And what this does is it fades clips together. So I can play here when you can see what that's doing. It's just fading the two clips in together and then fading the last clip out. So we've added some transitions, and now I think it's time to add a nice title in the beginning. So we need to just make a little bit of room here. So with my selector tool, I'm just going to move these clips a little bit forward in time. Then I'm going to go under Title, New Title, and I'm going to click on Default Still. And you can just name that title whatever you want. Click OK. And now this is going to open up this window where you can create your title. Just click and type whatever you want, and then of course you can just select portions of the title, change the font, or really anything else that you want. Usually I just use Nexa for my titles. It's just a really cool font. And then to center it with the screen, you can just right click on the text, go to Position, Horizontal Center. This will center it horizontally, and then right click on it again, Position, and Vertical Center. And now it's perfectly centered with our screen. So we can just exit this out. We don't even need to save or anything. It does it automatically. And then if it's not under your project panel, it's most likely in one of your bins. You can see that's in my footage bin. And since I don't really want it there, I'm just going to click and drag it onto my main project bin here. And then just like anything else, we just drag and drop it into our timeline. So you can see that it's sort of becoming very intuitive. It's pretty much all just drag and drop in a way. Now we're going to treat this just like any other clip, so we can shorten it and we can select it and hit Command D, and this will add those default transitions. So now we have a title that fades up and fades out. But now we have a gap between the title and the rest of the clips. So I can right click and select Ripple Delete, and this will move all of my clips forward. Alright, so now it's time for some effects. Well, maybe it's not the effects that you're thinking of, but still, it's pretty cool stuff. So we're going to go back to our effects panel here. We're going to type in fast color corrector this time. And this again is just one example of the many effects that Premiere has. But the reason why I'm picking this one is because it's one of the effects that I use the most. So then what we can do is just select that effect, drag and drop it onto one of our clips, and nothing happens, and that's because we need to change some of the parameters of that effect. So in order to do that, we have to go under the Effects Controls panel, and from here we can see all of the settings that we can tweak for this effect. So we see this giant wheel of color. And what this does is pretty much, if I just drag this knob into some of these directions, you can see that it's changing the overall color of our clip. So this could be useful if you're trying to correct some shots that have a wrong white balance or something like that. And then if we scroll down, you can see that you can also change the brightness, the contrast, the saturation. So this is just one effect of many that you can just drag and drop into your clips. It's just a really cool tool to have to just do some color correction on the fly. Now another effect that we're going to look at is fast blur. And it's just because I already typed in fast and it's already there. So we're just going to blur out this image. But what I want you to notice is that it's stacking the effects one after another. So we can increase the blurriness here. But what if we want to take it a step further and animate how blurry this image is? So make it really blurry in the beginning and then decrease the blurriness as the camera moves out of the car. So what we can do is go to the beginning of our clip, which we don't see right now because it's fading from black. And then we want to increase the blurriness and click on the stopwatch icon. And you're going to see that it's going to turn blue and it's going to create a keyframe in this other section of the effects controls panel. Now this section is sort of a timeline for the individual clips, so you can have a better understanding of what you're doing. So we're going to move forward in time. Once we reach a point that we want the blurriness to end, we can just bring that blurriness down to 0. And as soon as I do that, you can see that it automatically creates a new keyframe. So as I scroll through here, you can see that it goes from blurry to sharp. Now, as you can see, this isn't the only property that has a stopwatch next to it. And the nice thing about Premiere, just like After Effects, is that anything that has a stopwatch next to it, you can animate. So you can add keyframes just like we did and animate any parameter that has a stopwatch next to it. So that's really exciting because you can do a lot with just animating keyframes. So we've looked at how to add effects onto individual clips, but what if we want to add an effect that stretches over multiple clips? So if we go back to our project panel here, if we click on this icon that says new item, we can actually select adjustment layer among other elements that you can create. So you can click OK in this box, and then it creates this new element in your project bin. Now if I drag and drop it onto my timeline on top of my clips, and then if I stretch it over all of my clips, nothing happens. But that's exactly what we want, because what we just created is a transparent video layer that will affect everything else that's underneath it. So if I add an effect to that adjustment layer, all of the clips underneath it are going to be affected by that effect. Now I'm going to add an effect called lumetri, and this is just to import a LUT file or a LUT file. And essentially what a LUT file is, if you don't know, it's just a preset for color grading essentially. So it's just a file that contains a bunch of information that changes your footage and makes it look nice, essentially. And so this is a LUT file specific to my A7S, and you can see that it makes the footage look a lot better since I shot this in S-Log2. But anyways, that's not the point. I'm sorry if I'm confusing you with this. But the main point is that we're selecting an effect onto our adjustment layer, and it's affecting all of the clips underneath it. So you can see the before and after as I toggle this video track on and off. And by the way, this is a perfect time to mention this. You can see that you can toggle on and off video tracks with this eye icon over here. And there's the same thing for audio, so pretty much you can mute a track, or you can even solo a track if you just want to listen to that one track instead of listening to everything else that's in your timeline. And now since this effect that we added to this adjustment layer sort of darkened everything else up, we can go back to our effects controls panel for that first clip, and we can brighten it up by using the fast color corrector. And then we can go to the second clip, and we can always just add another fast color corrector to that second clip so that we can also brighten it up just a little bit. But this can get pretty annoying if you have several clips in your timeline and you pretty much want to do the same type of adjustments for each clip. Then it's just much better to copy the effect. So you can go under effects controls, select the effect, hit Command C to copy the effect, or Control C on a PC. Then you can go to the next clip that doesn't have that effect and hit Command V or Control V for PC, and that will paste that effect onto that clip. So this is pretty awesome if you have certain parameters that you've tweaked on, let's say this fast color corrector, for example, and you want all the shots to have that same brightness. Then instead of just going back to the effects panel and just, dragging and dropping it for each one and making sure that all the parameters match, this is a much faster way of just copying one effect and pasting over multiple clips. And then if you want to, you can always go back and adjust the individual parameters of each clip without affecting any of the other ones. All right, so one of the last things that we're going to be looking at before we render this is audio. So we're just going to add a song to this sequence, and then I'm just going to drag and drop it into my project panel. Just like with any other thing, you can double click on it and this will bring it up in your source monitor where you can preview the song, you can set in and out points. So pretty much just like what we did with the video clips. And now you can see that the film strip icon is grayed out because obviously we don't have a video portion of this element. So the only thing that we can drag and drop into our timeline is the audio. So we're going to click on that waveform icon and drag and drop our audio layer onto our audio track in our timeline. Now, one quick thing that I want to mention is if you drag and drop an element over anything else that's already in your timeline, it will overwrite and delete that element. Okay, so if I go right to the left here and I scroll up with my mouse, you can see that it expands the waveform for this audio layer. This is pretty useful when you're editing, especially when you're editing to the beat of a track. But another reason why this is useful is because if you go over to the center of it, where the left channel splits off with the right channel, you can see that there's actually a line that you can bring up and down. And this is pretty much the volume of your track. So if I bring it up, it makes it louder. If I bring it down, it makes it quieter. But what if we want to fade the song up or maybe even make it softer in certain parts? This is where keyframes come in handy again. We can go under the effects controls panel and we can expand the volume property of this audio layer and we can make a keyframe at this point in time. Then we go back to the beginning and we can scrub this number all the way down to negative 287 decibels, which for Premiere is complete quiet. So now if I preview this, you can see that the audio is fading up. Now you might not be able to hear it, but you can see from the levels that it's fading up. So then let's say that we want this part to go a little bit softer or louder. Then again, same thing, we're just going to add another keyframe. Then we're going to move a little bit forward in time. And then we can just make it maybe a little bit louder. And then we can maybe go a little bit further, add another keyframe, and move forward in time near the end, and bring it all the way down. Now something else that you've noticed while we're adding all these keyframes is that the horizontal line that represented the volume is now changed because we've keyframed how loud and how soft it gets. And the nice thing about seeing this line is that you can actually click and drag it down and change the volume this way as well. You can even click on the actual keyframes or these sort of points and you can move them forward and backwards in time, make them louder. There's a ton of flexibility this way and it saves a ton of time. Instead of just deleting and making new keyframes, you can just move the keyframes that you already made around. And then again, just to cut all the excess, we're going to use our razor tool and cut here in the end. Then go back to our selector tool up here and then click on the rest of it and just hit delete. So with this, we are actually done. We're almost ready to render. Now, obviously, you want to preview what you have before you render just to make sure. And by the way, to enlarge certain windows, you can hover over them with your cursor and hit the tilde key on your keyboard. And this applies to the preview window as well as any other panel in Premiere. So I can go to my effects controls panel, hit the tilde key. That will make that full screen. Go to my timeline, hit the tilde key, and make that full screen as well. And the tilde key, if you don't know what it is, which I had no idea what it was for a very long time, it's that squiggly looking symbol on the top left corner of your keyboard. Anyways, if we're ready to export, we can go under File, Export Media, and this new window is going to pop up with a lot of words and numbers, but we're only going to focus on a few specific parts. The first thing that we want to change is the format. Now in my case, I actually don't want to change it. I want to leave it to H.264. And if you have it to anything else, just make sure to change it to that. 9 times out of 10, you're going to want to export to H.264. Now as far as a preset, I usually leave mine to match source high bitrate. But if you're exporting to a phone or anything else or YouTube or something like that, it's nice because you have a lot of presets already set up for you. Now going down here, you can see that the video width and height are correct, 1920 by 1080. And then over here, the bitrate is pretty much the compression quality. So I usually put mine to 10 or 12. But just a heads up, YouTube usually compresses it down to 8 anyways. Now the output name, you can name it whatever you want. And this also allows you to select what folder you want to save it into and hit save. And then you can hit Q if you're doing multiple renders or different versions of this render. But for us, I'm just going to hit export. And that is it. We have reached the 20-minute mark right on the dot, concluding this long or short tutorial depending on how you see it. I hope it didn't sound too confusing at times, and I really hope that this tutorial helped you learn everything you need to know in order to get started with Premiere Pro. And if you did enjoy the video, please hit like, and if this is your first time on my channel, please hit subscribe. I make all kinds of weird videos of visual effects, tutorials, and filmmaking tips. If you're into any of that, check out my other videos. And if you want to see more of the footage that we were using today, go ahead and check out the main video where I explored an abandoned factory in Italy, and I shot it with my A7S on the Ronin M. So it's definitely an interesting video, but you know, go ahead and check it out if you're interested in all that kind of stuff. Anyways, my name is Chris Jurini for Chris Corp Productions. I'll see you next time.